we can now move on to the next keynote speech, okay? The title is going to be Shifting Platforms for Narrative Video Games. It all starts with a good story and a pitch. We're going to invite on stage in just a moment or two Trevor Walton, co-founder of Mediterranean Screen Arts Academy. Trevor has 30 years of film and television experience. Starting his career in London as an agent, he represented some of the biggest names in the entertainment industry, such as Alan Rickman, wow, Pierce Brosnan, and Rick Mayall. I don't know if you remember Rick. He was a funny guy. After being an agent, he moved on to become a studio executive, heading scripted programming, working with the largest network corporations in North America, which include CBS, Fox, Lifetime, and CBC. Trevor, please join us and give him a round of applause, please. It is lovely to see you, sir.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Nice to be here. Hello, 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 hello. It's much quieter in the afternoon with the children gone, so I don't know if that'll make more sense now. All right, so I come from a very traditional storytelling background, so I was incredibly excited to be invited here to talk to you guys and to be at PlayCon. I have 2 observations so far of PlayCon, and they both, strangely enough, are gender-specific. It's great to see all those studio executives come up on stage here, 19 of them. 16 of them were men. Just saying, there were 3 women. Out there, lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of games are being played. At the far end of the room is one called Kit Kat, Give Yourself a Break. And there are two areas. There's one which has a dancing video, and the other one has a football video. All the girls were dancing, and all the boys were watching football. Nothing in between. That was the delineation. Anyway, those are my 2 first observations. There is a wonderful man called Yuval Harari, who's a well-known author and a big human brain. And he says the following: AI might come to dominate humanity either by accident or design, simply by telling its own story better than we tell ours. I think that's quite an interesting thought. And I'm not paranoid, but I thought it was an interesting thing to note. I'm not going to have any slides. Number of speeches yesterday, some people said, everything I'm about to tell you, you can find on ChatGPT. I'm not even sure why I'm here, somebody said. You can just find it all on ChatGPT. Well, what I'm going to say to you today, you can't find on ChatGPT because it's a combination of my research and my anecdotes, my life in the business of storytelling. So everything you're about to hear, you're going to hear for once. And once I finish the page, it's gone for good. I want to start with a very simple 5-second moment of mindfulness. I want you to all close your eyes. I know you're going to all participate. I want you to all close your eyes. And I want you to think of your toes. Then I want to think about your toes in the socks or in the stockings that you're wearing. Those socks are in your shoes, and those shoes are firmly planted on the ground. You can open your eyes now. All of that is possible because of the laws of the universe. Gravitation keeps you rooted on the ground. Ask yourself this question. I'm going to give you the answer. Is gravity binary? This is what it says about gravity. Gravitational acceleration provides a quadratic change to displacement with respect to time. Gravitational acceleration is not exponential, which is the only way velocity could double each second for more than an instant. Therefore, the acceleration of gravity is not binary. So that's an interesting start. Think of yourselves physically, sitting at your screen, working on your games. This is working in a binary way. The computer is encouraging you to think in a binary way. Your eyes are focused, your hands are there, but your feet are on the ground. So this is a binary, and this is a non-binary thing that are happening at the same moment. That's a good thing to be thinking about. Okay, so the learning pyramid, which some of you may or may not know anything about, says that if you just listen to somebody, you're only going to remember 5% of what they say. It improves every so often, 10% if you read, 15% if you watch and read, etc., etc. But you're all just sitting here quite passively. You're going to remember 5% of what I'm saying. So I'm just going to give you some pointers to begin with, and then you can just tune out for the rest of the 24 minutes. A word I want you to write down. I think it's the most important word you can come up with, and that's the word curate. Curate. All the information you will ever need, you have in your computer sitting in front of you right now. There's a deluge of all the information you could ever want. The key is going to be how you curate that information. So just write that word down, curate. Second thing I want you to remember and to think about is that we're living in a world where we're going from being the general to the specific. The generalist is making way for the specialist. We are in the business of really refining how we tell stories, who is involved in the business of storytelling. So these are a key thing to remember. The other word I want you to remember is hybrid. We're living in a hybrid world, even though we may be specialists. So a narrative designer may well be a musician, may well be a code writer. These things would help. Once upon a time, when people went to Hollywood to become a writer, people would say, "What do you do?" And they go, "I'm a writer." And they go, "I have no idea what that means." "What do you mean you're a writer?" "Oh, I write scripts." "Oh, you're a script writer." Still doesn't really mean anything. "Oh, I work in television." "Oh, you're a television script writer." Well, that still doesn't really define. "Oh, I write comedy." "Oh, you're a comedy television writer." Okay, that's who you are. So Hollywood has always been about being a specialist, but the storytelling world has become more involved with specialism than ever before. So hybrid, remember that. And then my last part for the 5% that you're going to remember is this. What turns a game from being good to great to being a forever game? What makes that difference? So everybody that's spoken today, really eloquent, they really know their subject, they really know how to pitch their project. And every time I see the word IP, it's amongst a lot of other words, which is amongst a lot of other bullet points, and usually around what platform, where the money's coming from, who's financing it, what kind of distribution deal, how the publishers are going to be reacting, how you can sell your project. And the most important word for me is IP. What turns something from being good to great to forever is a great story. They did a survey recently about great stories. And the first great story, it is understood, was Homer's Odyssey. I think that was 1500, before BC. Still one of the most relevant stories. I go all the way further to, I won't. I'll stop there. So, the idea that we are in a whole new brave world is true, but it's also a continuation. It is where our storytelling from Homer's Odyssey to every one of the stories that people were pitching here today, there is a direct line connecting it all. All right, so I'm just going to tell you a little bit about how I started, because I think it's relevant in all of this. I have no education at all. I didn't go to university. I don't have a diploma. I didn't go to a polytechnic. I didn't go to school for further education. None of it. I got a job working as a tea boy, which means making the tea and running errands in an agency that represented actors. And that was where I started. And then I met a girl, and she said, "You're middle-aged, you're 21 years old, this is ridiculous, let's go to Hollywood." I went, "Okay." So we go to LA, she's American, we go to LA, and I'm at a dinner party. I'm just sitting at a dinner party, just any table, and I've had a drink or two, and I tell a story. I just tell a funny story at the dinner party. And yes, unbeknownst to me, at the far end of the table was an executive from CBS. And he said the next day, "I liked how you told that story. That's exactly the tone I want for the network. Why don't you come and work for me at CBS?" So I know this is the worst possible example of how to get a job in Hollywood, or indeed in the media. My formula was a little bit of alcohol, a little bit too full of myself, and at a dinner party where I want to show off. And I got a job out of it. I then went on to be the commissioning editor for 4 North American television networks. What they call in the UK, I was a commissioning editor. So I commissioned the shows, I then edited them with my team, and then I'd decide which ones would actually turn into a program, a series, a movie, or whatever, and then they'd go off and make it. My father once asked me, he said, "What do you do for a living?" And I said, "Oh, I sit in a room, people come in and they tell me stories, and then I decide which ones should be made into a script." And he said, "That is the most ridiculous job I have ever heard of. That is not a real job." I was incredibly grateful that I had that brilliant job. So I worked it out just for this speech. I took 2 pictures a day, 5 days a week, 48 weeks a year, for 25 years. I think I've heard over 10,000 pitches in that time. And I think Malcolm Gladwell, the turning point and all of those things, he would say 10,000 hours, I am an expert. So I'm completely uneducated, have absolutely no idea what I'm doing, but I had 10,000 stories were told to me, and I made about 500 hours of television. So, commissioning editor. I just want you guys to think about these 2 words, because that's how I sort of see the creative process. You are the commissioning, you commission in your little head what you think is an interesting story, and then you go about the business of editing it and making it something that could possibly turn into something. So I know all sorts of people have theories about, you should think of your own brain, your own imagination as like a corporate office, and you're the CEO and all the aspects are sitting around you. I think that's completely fine. But commissioning editor feels a little less grand and a little bit more real. I always make this analogy. If you said to somebody, "Hey, I've just come back from my holidays in Malta, and I've got 10,000 pictures here I'd love you to see of my wonderful holiday," every single person, including your mother, is going to go, "Oh, dear God, no." But if you say, "Hey, I went to Malta, I had a fantastic time. I took 10 great shots. Would you like to see them, Mum?" She'd go, "Absolutely, darling. You just show me every one of those 10 pictures." Curation is really important. Somebody in my office put it really well the other day, and she said, when I understand what you're talking about, it's like stringing a pearl necklace. Whatever information you may have, whatever's pouring out at you, you decide, you curate, you commission. I like this idea, and I like that idea, and they sort of string together well. And I think if I did this from that piece of information and this, then I have a whole necklace of pearls here, or whatever it is that I'm trying to create. So I think that's quite a good image for me. So, becoming an expert at storytelling was really fun. But obviously, the key part of all of this is that each and every one of you already is an absolute, complete expert in the business of storytelling. And the reason is because from a very, very early age, you sat watching whatever video you were placed in front of, or whatever TV screen you were placed in front of, and you immediately started working out, I like this, I don't like this, I'd like to see her again, I never want to encounter that scene again, I don't want to go down that road. So you have subconsciously started the process of being a critic and knowledgeable about storytelling. We used to have a thing called the shit-click factor in television. And the shit-click factor is when you're sitting there with a clicker, you're in front of the screen, and you go, oh, this is shit. Click. That's what you want to avoid at all costs in the business of storytelling. You want to try and keep the shit-click factor at a minimum, because once it's happened, it's over. So, I have an interesting side point here. Parents no longer read bedtime stories to their children. It's mainly a machine that has taken over that business. Just something to know. Again, this is not the world of pitching. The business of storytelling is not about pitching a dissertation. Nobody outside of your university or your college or whatever it is going to listen to your pitch in great detail and say, I give them a B plus, C minus here. No. Nobody in the pitching world is going to be listening to you that closely. None of them are going to do a précis of what you've created in that fabulous deck and say, oh, I think this is very, yes, they get X number of marks for imagination, they get X number of months for presentation. None of it. It's about the gut. They look at it and they go, can they smell it? Once you've been doing this for a long time, somebody comes in, they can be nervous, they can bumble along, they can lose control of their bowels. But if they know their story, that person that you're pitching to is going to understand it. So they're going to appreciate it, they're going to connect with it. So these things are really important. So in the world that I came from, development was 2.5 to 1, which usually meant that you could develop 2.5 projects on average, and you'd only have to make one of them. So you had a little bit of flexibility, so you could throw in things into the mix that were just a little bit different. Nobody was going to care. I had the budget to do it. Sometimes I just threw in a completely absurd story from a completely absurd source just to see what they might come up with. All the pitches I've heard, again, I'm not being critical, I thought they were all very interesting in their own ways. But if, like Harari says, if we don't tell our story better than we're currently doing, then the machine is going to tell our stories for us. If in the business of community gaming, in intersubjective narratives, if what you're, someone's put their hand up, if in those stories you connect, if you find a way to understand who is behind that mask, who that villain is, it doesn't in life, in the human world, doesn't usually end with you being able to pick up a gun and blow their head off, and that be regarded as a really positive thing. That's usually frowned upon in human society. But clearly, as we've seen today and yesterday and everything, there's a lot of opportunity for a lot of mass murder. It's just an interesting fact. When I think about conflict resolution, and somebody said something really interesting yesterday, and they were talking about, we don't make war games, we create war solutions. And I thought, that's really interesting. That's a really interesting concept. So if that were to be the case, which I completely understand, then I think of other solutions that we as human beings have that may not be a part of a community gaming session. Could it be more than you're a friend and therefore not the enemy? Are you going to be nice to me, or are you going to try to kill me? But in human nature, we have a huge range of emotions. With every single one of you, right now that I can actually see, I have formed an opinion about who you are. And every single one of you watching me right now, within 5 seconds of arriving on stage, already had an opinion of me. Might have been conscious, might have been completely subconscious, may be completely inaccurate. I may look like that dreadful old grandfather you used to have that used to bounce you on your knee and you hated him. Not my fault. You may be looking at me and going, oh, he's a lot more attractive than I would imagine a man of his age. That's completely acceptable as well. So you will form an opinion right away, and then you build on that opinion. But that's a gradual process of learning. So I just say, think about that which makes you a human and the way that you confront conflict and how you deal with conflict resolution. These are interesting things. When I see the games here today, I really like them. I think they're really fun. I'd be totally happy to play pretty much any of them. But they are all variations on a theme. They are within certain boundaries. All quite different, but within a certain boundary. And I'm here to say to you today that maybe this is a really slightly old-fashioned way of looking at what gaming could become. I was at a conference in Rome, I think this is relevant. I was at a conference in Rome and they were talking about AI and script writing and character development and narrative development. And it kept coming back to the screenplay, what was written. And there was one very smart young female Polish professor. And she said, I don't know what you're all talking about. Why the hell are you all talking about the future being something that you're writing down? What makes you think that a script's got anything to do with being written in the future? What on earth are you guys thinking about? And I was like, I want to meet this woman. She's really interesting to me. She's thinking beyond. I had the honor once of meeting Stephen Hawkins, the great man. A friend was making a documentary about him. And his mother said that when he was a student, he was okay. Then he lost all control of his body. He had nothing left. It couldn't do anything. Just his brain was functioning. And she said he then got really smart because he got a bit focused. He started to think in a slightly different way because he had no body left. He was just a brain. And she said what was interesting was that he came up with the wrong answers so many times. He so didn't get it right. But what he did better than anybody else was he asked questions. He asked the most interesting questions. He asked questions that even the dons at his university went, I hadn't thought of it like that. And that's what I encourage you to do. I say, absolutely great, everything that we saw today. But I also say, think well outside of that box. Think about all those 11-year-olds we've seen today running around so overexcited it was exactly like being in Las Vegas for children. I've never seen anything like it. Those children, of course, will grow up. And they may be playing a 200-day game or a forever game or a 70-day immersive game, whatever. But I can almost guarantee you that their tastes are going to change from 11 to 21 to 31 to 41 to 51 to 61 to 71 to 80 to 90 years old. Are they still going to be playing Candy Crush? My guess is probably they will have moved on to a more sophisticated and a more interesting, for their times, approach to this immersive experience. I've only got 5 minutes left. That's great. I'm not going to you go to ChatGPT. They'll tell you who can teach you, who should be the best school, the best 5 schools for narrative telling. The University of Malta have got a fantastic program. But what we try to do is at the Mediterranean Screen Arts Academy, plug, is I co-founded it with a filmmaker, a brilliant storyteller called Roland Joffe. And Roland Joffe told a couple of definitive stories. One was called The Killing Fields with Robert De Niro, and the other one was called The Killing Fields. And it's been fascinating working with him. It's fascinating to see how his stories changed people's lives. We're working with a university in Madrid called IE University, and we're creating a BA program with them on media and the business of storytelling. The woman, the dean, very sophisticated, very academic. She's sitting with Roland, and she opens her purse, and she says, "This is the ticket stub from when I went to see The Killing Fields when I was 14. What would you like to do at my university?" That was and now we're doing a 4-year BA program with them. My point is, stories have incredible power. That woman must have seen 1,000 movies. She's head of all sorts of things. No, she's got the ticket stub for a movie that she saw 40 years ago. That's a very good sign of a very good storyteller. So what we're trying to do at the Mediterranean Screen Arts Academy is we are trying to bring Hollywood and executives that have been working in all sorts of storytelling fields here to Malta to come and talk to our school. So our first idea was to have 2 people. And we wanted to bring 2 companies to show that we were serious about what we were doing. One, we brought over a company called CAA. It's Creative Artists Agency. It's the most powerful agency in the world. They have offices all over the world. And one of our executives is in Beijing today, having lunch with the head of CAA Motion Pictures. So she's in Beijing meeting with them. We brought CAA here to talk about storytelling. The guy we brought was the guy that picked up a script, and it was called The Walking Dead. And he said, that seems like a good idea. Let's go with that. And he finished his time on The Walking Dead representing the producers who were suing the studio because they were short about $200 million in the last audit. But that's obviously another story. He also was responsible for Shogun. He picked up the book. He said, someone should remake this. I think we shall. 18 Emmys later, it turned out to be a good idea. So he's the man that we brought. Then the second man that we brought to Malta was somebody that Roland and I had both worked with. I'd known him for 30 years. He's the head of, well, it's pretty much the head of Disney Television. He's in charge of their writing program, their directing program, all the rest of it. Head of development. He's head of diversity. And he has one of those titles which I've always dreamt of having, which is at the end it says, he's in charge of of all Disney business units. I go, that sounds like a heavy-duty guy. We brought him to Los Angeles. We did a lecture at the University of Malta. We sent him to the American Embassy. We did a whole thing because what we wanted to show was that we're a school that absolutely loves academia. We absolutely understand the process. But Roland and I both come from the business of doing it, just doing it, just planting a flag and seeing what happens. Did it make sense? Did it not make sense? What will we never do again? What should we do in the future? So, I'm really supposed to be talking to you about a good pitch. I have 1 minute and 19 seconds. Right. Successful pitch. Having the right set of expectations for yourselves, the executives, and the outcome. Remember that whoever you're pitching to, they are pitching to somebody internally. If you can't make the story clear to him or her, she's not going to be able to talk to the chairman and say, this is a great idea, and then not be able to pitch it. Make sure that you understand you are pitching to somebody who's going to be on the learning curve with you. He's going to pitch it internally. Remember this. Use simple language, clarity, brevity, and be you. Why are you the best and perhaps the only person to bring this story to a show? Fewest words possible. Spielberg. Write this down. If a person, I've got 35 seconds. If a person can tell me the idea in 25 words or less, it's going to make a pretty good movie. Good thing to remember. Test each platform before you pitch. All pitches are usually Zoom. Read actively, but not super fast. Do what works for you. Practice, practice, practice. 13 seconds. Pitch decks, irrelevant. What to expect from pitch meeting? Some small talk to start with. Calm your nerves, adjust your pitch and go. You can make changes between pitches. Pitch to the last company you want to work with to practice your pitch. Don't go to your top place and go, right, I'm ready, I'm going to pitch, and here we are at now. No, go to that smallest company. They go, it's shit. Well, I think you're shit. That's fine, move on. Oh, I'm out of time. When I first got involved in AI, when I first started looking at generative imaging, and I was able to add my part to generative imaging, I was completely overwhelmed. And I thought this, I suddenly felt that I was in the cockpit of my imagination. The only limits are your own imagination. That's it.